Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Sanjay and I'll be your host for the webinar today. Our webinar today focuses on best approach for mobile app development, choosing between native, web, or hybrid. Our webinars are designed to gain insight into the field of mobility, which is in fact becoming an essential part of our daily life. Endeavour Software Technologies, a mobility-focused organization with more than 300 experts having 11 plus years of expertise, are the leaders in providing mobility solutions to several Fortune 100 companies across the globe and enabling them to leverage mobility for their organization. In today's webinar, we will have 45 to 50-minute session followed by 15 minutes question and answer round. Please feel free to raise any questions in between the presentation by typing them in the questions window in your GoToWebinar console. The webinar is being recorded for your convenience and the recordings will be made available on techendeavour.com/webinars. Now, let me kickstart the presentation by introducing our panelists. Today we have Tom Parrish, Mobile Strategy Thought Leader, Avinash Birnale, VP Technology, and Dwarak, Head of Technology Competency Group. Now, I would like to invite Tom to take us through the webinar today. Over to you, Tom.
Thank you very much, Sanjay, and a very special thanks to each of you listening today. I know your time is busy, so we want to make sure this webinar gives you the answers you're looking for with regards to a better understanding of enterprise mobile apps and the development process that go with each one. As Sanjay said, Avinash and Dwarak will be assisting with the slides also as we move through these. Please remember, submit your questions while you're listening. In the interface there's a place where you can be doing that, because at the end of the webinar, we'll be answering all the questions that we can in the given time that we have. So let's begin on the agenda, Sanjay. I'm going to cover a mobile industry overview. There'll be some trends here that some of you may know, but there are some nuances in what's going on in the mobile industry, especially from an enterprise perspective, that we'd like for you to know more about. Then I'll actually talk about mobile app development as it relates in general to hybrid web and native type apps. And there we go. And the next thing, we'll actually go into some real detail with regards to native web and hybrid apps from a facts and myths point of view. I rather like this part of it because there actually are quite a few misunderstandings in the current where we are right now in development process, and I think you'll find this helpful. Then we'll be choosing the right app. I'll actually have an opportunity to go through some examples, and we'll discuss more about what each app is about from its strengths and weaknesses perspective, and then an example of each one. And as you see on the agenda there's a bit of a spoiler. The native app is great for when performance matters. Web app is write once, run everywhere, and hybrid is fully loaded with better fuel economy. But beware, things generally don't work out as simple as that, and we'll talk more about why that's so when we get into the webinar. Best practices. There's some very important best practices that will be communicated here to you, and then of course Endeavor's service offering overview with regards to all of the expertise that they bring in the enterprise marketplace in fielding apps, and then of course all of your questions. So don't forget, put your questions in as we're moving along here. Sanjay, let's go on to the first one, mobile industry overview trends. All right, well, just like it says up there, as predicted by Gartner, mobile phones have surpassed PCs. And I think most of you, if you're in the development area or in your technical management, you now know this either by fact or by instinct. There's just a lot of mobile devices around. By 2015, the media tablet shipments will reach around 50% of the mobile laptop shipments. Even Windows 8 will likely be in third place, coming along behind Google Android and Apple iOS. But let's talk about the consumerization of IT. This is a new phrase that's beginning to become part of the IT dialogue, and in particular, something referred to as the personal cloud. The personal cloud shifts the focus from the client device to cloud-based services, and most of us are already starting to experience that. If you use the Google products, and you have Google Mail, Google Drive, Google Calendar, and all the related services that go along with that platform. There's a similar one for Apple. And it's basically a way of the personal cloud will entail the unique collection of services, the web destinations and connectivity that become the home of your computing and communication device, all in this cloud. And we'll be seeing more about that, talking more about that. Gartner says that by 2016, more than 50% of the mobile apps will be hybrid. That's an interesting fact. And we'll speak more to that as we get into the presentation. So, Sanjay, let's move on to the next slide. Okay. So the purpose of this webinar is not to discover the best development approach, as such it really doesn't exist, but rather we want to list the pros and cons. Each one of these approaches have, and describe the different scenarios and the enterprise requirements that best fit one or the other. Okay, because that's where you're really coming from, is what's the best fit given your situation in your enterprise IT environment, and of course the requirements that you're trying to satisfy with one or more apps in this particular area that you need development in. So having said that, let's explain what a native and a web and a hybrid app. Technically speaking, a native app is mobile resident application. Sometimes we refer to it as thick or thin, which stays and it runs and it interacts locally on the mobile device. The content for the application may come from a central server, but it may very well just be local database of information. All native apps contain the basic information it needs to launch. Doesn't even need to be on the network. Developers generally architect it such that upon successful first launch through the internet access, it can bring the most recent information from the server, but it's not actually required right at the beginning. A mobile app, okay, the next one, applications are basically the website, or think of them as website portals that are like completely fine-tuned for the mobile browser. That's the way I think of it. And mobile websites most of the time depend on user agent details found in the HTTP requests. Okay? So based on the device browser configuration, the website, can deliver specialized content that suits the renderers, what can be rendered there on the device. A hybrid app, okay, the hybrid app is the kind of an average between a native and a web, basically. Generally, it's a shell written as a native app, and it's got all its internal pages. The screens and contents are delivered dynamically, though, over the web. Yet it's not really a website in itself. Instead, there are various, think of them as portlets or content snippets delivered by HTML and XML and similar specifications by the back end. Okay, so there we are. Those are the three. Now let's go into a little bit more detail. And Sanjay, if you'll go to the next page, please. There we have a little bit more to cover here. Myths. It's also often assumed that hybrid apps are the best fit in all scenarios, and really there is no such thing as a universal solution. When you have a lot of custom controls or an extremely rich user interface that depends on platform controls, hybrid applications aren't always the best way to go. HTML5 will be ready in the year 2022. That's a ways from now, but actually that's just not the case. The working draft is closed. If you're following it at all, you know that. And the fine specs, they'll be fine-tuned over time, but most of what you want to do is there. There can't be any significant changes to the spec, and minor changes will probably not really affect you. Web apps always need connectivity. Well, web apps built using HTML5 to utilize local databases don't have to have connectivity all the time. Note that the storage capacity is limited in this particular setup compared to native or hybrid apps, which makes sense, right? Okay, next one is web apps need connectivity. The next one is native apps can only give the best user experience. Well, the user experience is just, it's how it looks, how useful it is, how smooth and fluid, and how contextual the design feels as you move from one part of it to the next. It can be implemented. You can implement some pretty slick stuff now. using appropriate CSS and HTML and then JavaScript constructs. And there are some cool apps. We'll actually mention a couple of these. So, it can be done, but it's going to be more work. Next is web apps are just faster to develop. That really depends on the design and the functional complexity of the application. And if you think about it, that makes sense. Even if there's a difference of effort spent for web apps compared to the others, sometimes it's kind of marginal when you get down to it. HTML5 was invented as Apple stopped supporting Flash. Well, this is one we just keep hearing floating around and around. Apple only supported HTML5, and their participation in the, in the spec and all for the iPhone when it came out, it influenced it a great deal. But they didn't invent it. In fact, that was just rather made famous between that HTML versus 5 Flash issue with Steve Jobs way back then. Anyway, let's go to facts now. Hybrid apps with high content consumption have greater usability. And that's since the dynamic content can be designed to render on multiple devices in a more convincing manner, there's generally greater usability of the controls, content, and logic written. And you'll be using the common content delivery mechanisms, content itself, and workflows across platforms and devices or solutions. In other words, hybrid apps are pure shells that heavily depend on the content being delivered. That's really what you want to keep in mind. Web apps are not so far behind on user interface and device accessibility. As mentioned earlier, there is a lot more that you can do if you're pretty savvy with HTML and CSS and JavaScript. So, in the old days, you just couldn't get access to the contacts and the camera, and, the old days, being 12, 24 months ago, but that's how it is, right? But now you can do more with web apps, considerably more. And in fact, we'll be talking about that. Mobile app development is either too fast or too slow. That's just generally due to a lack of clarity in what a mobile app should achieve. So we'll talk more about that further in the slides. All right, Sanjay, let's go on to 8. All right, so with regards to choosing the right app, and let's say we take native first and understand what that is. There's really no formal definition, but in general, everyone understands native app as an application specifically designed to be installed on the device's operating system. And I think we all know this from going to the apps, the iTunes App Store, or the BlackBerry App Store, Android, whatever. You load the app on your phone and you've got it. It's all there. I'll just touch on a few key things here. When choosing a native app development process, one thing you want to keep in mind is the user experience can generally be superior, and there are 2 reasons for this improved experience. It's just smoother navigation, offers more fluid. You can feel it when you're using the app. And it's because it's just the inherent capabilities of storing information on the device and the ability to handle large amounts of data and lists and images that are all, local versus coming over the web from web pages. And also the native apps can more fully utilize an SDK, user interface controls, and allow for more custom ones to be pulled together. So you just get a really cool looking interface. And there's easier hardware software integration. It was impossible to do, GPS and camera and microphone and contacts and calendars and email and all that. But of course, as we've said, in hybrid, you can begin to do that more. Security, that's where the native reigns. When it comes to building more secure applications where you've got to protect local data stored on the device, native apps are just unbeatable. That's, encryption there can be handled and without affecting performance. With regard to performance, it's just generally observed that native apps are more responsive, significantly more responsive. And, there's some app economics, notifications. Customers can receive reliable and timely push notifications on their phone with native apps. They're just easier to access on the store directly. They're great for brand building and better engagement. and whatnot. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we move through. Sanjay, next slide, please. Let's go to an example of a native app. So here's a native app it's simple in its if you think about what it's doing, which is basically home safety and automation, security. So if those of you who have seen or you have an alarm system at home, the idea with the app is to make it look and feel and respond just like a piece of hardware attached to the wall there, right? It allows you to arm it and control the motion sensors, turn them on and off, see what's going on with lights and things of this nature. And the primary reason why the developers chose this to be built as a native app, they wanted really, really tight integration with security, hardware. They wanted it to be rugged and simple, fast. They want to be able to customize the input pad to control functions. People like to label their control functions and things like that, right? And it just needs to be what we consider high availability. The last thing you want to do is go to this app and have it not be responding. So, and it needs to have some ability with or without the network, all right? And an Android version of this app is also embedded into a custom-built ROM for output of the box usage, which is the tightest possible integration with the operating system. Again, what you want is real-time response from a control panel, and a native app is just the best way to go there. There are many other examples, but that's what we have for this one. Now, if we go to the next slide, please, Sanjay. A web app is specifically designed to run in a mobile browser. This we've mentioned before. But the mobile app relies on an active internet connection. Got to have it, because you basically have web pages, HTML and CSS, that's looking for information coming from another location. So since web apps are browser-based, they can run on virtually any smartphone or tablet, which is pretty cool, right? You don't have to program it to fit all the custom SDK controls in a particular OS. The key advantage is, generally speaking, they're just easier to develop and maintain and distribute. Okay. A few characteristics. The code is executed in the browser. We talked about that. Same base code can be reused. Don't generally need to make the phone. Generally, you don't generally take advantage of the phone's features in a web app, such as the camera and geolocation and native context, but that's beginning to change slightly. The data is stored over the cloud, while following service-oriented architecture environments to provide you this data. And usually the navigational user interface on these kinds of web apps has got kind of a generic look, doesn't have that really custom smooth look than a native app. And the rendering happens on the server side basically, and so for the pages for it to be delivered back, so requires internet connectivity. Disadvantages: performance. As a result of the limited capabilities of mobile browsers, functionality and user experience is much lower on web apps than native apps, and again, we can sort of feel that when we're using them. Okay, let's go to an example of a web app. Next slide, Sanjay. The application in this example is meant for enterprise sales team. They needed access to various product brochures that they sell. The primary objective of the app is to help sales team enhance their knowledge about the products and product lines. It delivers all content in connect mode only, and it allows users to answer the questionnaire about the products and provide general reading context. As you can see, there is not much complexity in the display, nor in the data needs or performance requirements. Moreover, the company, what they wanted was to target all the sales folks who have varying kinds of devices, ranging from iOS to Android to BlackBerry and Windows phones. So they needed to provide something to their sales team for knowledge enhancement that was very important to do that. And so they decided to develop something quickly and make available to everyone who needs it, with Endeavor's help, of course. Okay, let's talk about hybrid apps. This is the one kind of everyone wants to know about. you could say you get the best of both worlds, and there's a tendency to think that, but life has a certain symmetry to it. There's a flip side of the coin where you also get the worst as well. So, for example, security browser-based solutions have some vulnerabilities, so you have to keep this in mind. Hybrid apps are written with the same technology used for mobile websites and mobile web implementations, and they're hosted inside a native container on the mobile device. Okay? So there is a bit of a native container on the device that has to be created. But the hybrid mobile apps, as the name implies, is the marriage of web technology and native execution. That's another way to think about it. They're made partially from native components and web components. Only they run together. So some of the characteristics is you have embedded HTML with the native app. Selected portions are written with web technologies. The web portion of the app can either be downloaded from the web or packaged within an app, which is kind of cool. So depending on what you need to do. The option allows companies to reap all the benefits of native apps while ensuring a longevity based on well-established web technologies. And it has all the benefits of native apps because you have full access to the APIs and App Store presence. You're just not using them as fully as you would in native. Using a development framework, companies can develop a cross-platform application that use web technologies while still taking advantage of some of the native, phone features, which is kind of nice. Again, it's a blend of the two. And typically, these kind of apps could work with or without internet connectivity. The Bank of America app is like that. The Facebook app is like that. All these apps are downloaded from the App Store and have the features of natives. However, they require updates from the web. All right, let's go to the next page, please, where we have an example. So continuing, we've mentioned some examples of hybrid. One of them, this is a car rental company most of us have heard of, Thrifty. And this is a rather static layout, which is what they wanted, but they had certain branding requirements. Everyone wants to be able to identify, Thrifty. But it needs to be extremely dynamic, okay, in order to power it. There's more of a shell. This one is more of a shell that's loading web pages that are already developed, and they all have their services already defined on the website. So the Thrifty website already has a number of services defined, as you well know. Reserving a car in a city at a particular time for a particular length of time. All of those services, per se, those web services, are already defined. We're just sort of bringing access to them into this hybrid device. What the shell of the app is native. All the contents are fed via HTML from the server, and the app is developed using a cross-platform app development framework. So the App Store is compliant. So that it's compliant with the App Store footprint that's usually a requirement. And the app provides near native user experience, which is kind of nice, but you also have some offline data support at the same time. And we keep coming back to that, but that's important. So that you know, Flipboard and LinkedIn are other well-known hybrid apps that are available on major app stores and I think just about on all the devices. So now I'm going to hand over the presentation to Avinash and Dvorak, who will be speaking to the next slides to cover more technical detail regarding the development of these apps and cover the expertise that Endeavour brings to enterprise solutions.
Thank you, Tom. Now, with native web and hybrid application understanding we just learned, let me just recap everything here. Now, this slide actually talks about a lot of points, but to summarize, the native applications are more platform affinity portable and development cost-oriented applications, whereas others are not. Now, with these points, I want to specifically emphasize on to testing process or impact of testing for mobile, native, web, and hybrid applications. Ideally, as far as testing is concerned, hybrid and native apps behave much similar. Native and hybrid applications, they need more effort to test than the web application, purely because you have more scenarios associated with them for installation, uninstallation, anything that is related to external influences such as memory card insertion, messaging, a call comes in while you are using the application. If the same thing is to happen with the web application, it's the browser that will take care of all those things. But when it comes to native or hybrid applications, as a developer, we are supposed to write the code which will resume at the same place where you left last time, just before the call came or just before that interruption took place. Now, when it comes to compatibility with camera, address book, and notifications, you are going to test the native and web applications, because this is where the scenarios have added in more compared to web application. When it comes to synchronization, content upload, or more of an offline support, there are more test scenarios. So obviously we are talking about added effort and cost in terms of testing when it comes to native and hybrid applications compared to web applications. Again, if you just realize the target devices, the more number of target devices and more number of platforms, testing is anyway going to go increase. But when it comes to browsers, there are not many variety of browsers that you are going to support compared to the number of devices or the variety of devices and platforms that you have to support. Native and hybrid applications present many additional use cases, as we are talking about. And in terms of web applications, they are far easier, less labor-intensive to test or automate compared to native and hybrid applications. Test automating a web application is much straightforward and simpler compared to automating a native application or a hybrid application. There is a lot of automation script, a lot of automation tools and things that you need to put in place in order to test them. So with that, we would like to move on to the next slide, which my colleague Dwarak, who is heading the Technology Competency Group at Endeavour, will take care.
Thank you, Avinash. So far we have discussed about various factors to build mobile application. Obviously it includes programming skills, tools, techniques, user experience, device functionality, features, and so on. Some of them are covered in functional aspect of the system, but there are certain areas to be considered under non-functional aspect as well. I'm going to talk about security here. So security plays a major role in deciding native versus hybrid versus web. Considering must be made throughout the solution, not just the mobile. We have to have end-to-end security with respect to device, while in network, backend solutions, and so on. So there are certain applications that are involved in healthcare, banking, finance, automation systems take utmost care on security. Native applications are best suited for when security is a paramount importance. Native applications can also leverage platform-level APIs to provide best control over data, interactions, storage functions of the application, and support from OS and application frameworks. Security vulnerabilities are generally same for hybrid and web applications. In most modern web browsers prevent certain vulnerabilities such as malicious scripts or cross-domain requests. However, typically hybrid applications use UI WebView on iOS, WebView on Android. These are the native controls that use WebKit engines that do not offer same level of support as browser does. When choosing hybrid, you will get the best and worst of both even in security. You may have to address security in native application, browser framework, against additional effort would be required with respect to security-proof solution. So on web applications, on the other hand, we have lesser control over security requirements as compared to others, and also it depends upon functional aspects as well. So I'm going to talk about some examples what I have listed there. For example, screen and data caching. So it is very important right now in most of the smartphones where people can take a screenshot by pressing combination of keys on the device. We cannot stop this functionality. However, we can avoid sharing sensitive data by handling proper event mechanism, either by hiding data or by changing the screen UI layout. Implementing HTTPS message level security by including data integrity, session ID, confidentiality are some of the key points. So I'm going to provide some more information on security delete. Basically, whenever you are managing data, do not keep the trace in the memory. Introduce some kind of mechanism that will override your data before traces are compromised. Cross-site scripting, SQL injector are some of the points on security. I got a lot of questions in between, so I would like to answer one of the questions which will really relate to this point. How do you ensure local stored data on the mobile phone? So this question is very interesting question, and more or less whenever we want to ensure the locally stored data should be secure, we have to apply security on various stages. For example, requirement, design phase, following the best coding practice, understanding nuances of security framework on each platform, and so on. So with this approach, we'll be able to ensure data can be stored securely. So I have some tips to prevent the attack. Store only what is absolutely required. Leverage secure containers, platform provided encryption APIs, as well as do not grant files word readable or word writable permission.
Okay, so with security having a lot of details and being a primary factor to decide whether to go native, hybrid, or web, there are some other non-functional mobility considerations that we must have in our mind, which are basically the scalability, performance, maintainability, or usability of an application, or the requirements that you have in your mind. So basically, if you look at it, the native applications are far more scalable with respect to control to add new features and device capabilities. Now, when it comes to reachability, your web applications are far more reachable because it just needs to be like you use the URL, open it into the browser, it's there. Native applications, when you're adding the functions, like say you are adding a new feature and then you don't know whether it is a hardware dependent feature or independent, then that is something that you need to worry about when you are making a decision. So scalability is much better addressed in native applications if you have more of a hardware dependency and things that you want to do into native application. In case of hybrid application, it's a little bit different because you are at the mercy of underlying framework or the kind of enablers that you are using to build the hybrid application, because there may be the case that those frameworks might not give you a direct access or direct compatibility with the underlying hardware, so you might end up writing more and more custom controls. More and more custom controls you are writing it, probably you are getting the native way without knowing that you are doing a native application. That's the fun of it. Then when you look at performance, native applications are best suited when the performance and response times are most important. Probably when you have the more offline data access needs, such that like you have more than few MBs of data that you want to access. You want yet responsive, faster application. You want it to be available all the time, regardless of the connection speeds or connection availability. Native apps are the ways to go. Now, when it comes to native applications, probably the best part is that you can also make direct use of hardware-accelerated math functions and kind of APIs that are available to make your application more responsive, more faster, and that's the beauty of it. When it comes to web applications, they are often built using single source code and easier to maintain in general. Like, say, for example, just a variable CSS and the JavaScript to cater to a variety of devices, and the same pages would work as you need it on those devices or platforms or hardware. Native apps will have different source code base for every platform and sometimes device family. So obviously you have a bug, you need to fix it at many places. Of course, if you don't have a better development processes where you can promote the code as and when it is tested, verified, and built properly. Now, in case of web applications, that is not at all an hassle. You test it once and it is done and it goes onto all the browsers. All you need to make sure that the browser compatibility is not broken there. Hybrid applications being the average of native and web, of course, they carry the best and worst part of both the applications, or both the sides of it. When it comes to hybrid and web applications and user interface or user experience, although people argue saying that web applications are not UX friendly or not far rich in UX, they're not far behind as well. Of course, when you have more complex workflows and functionalities, you need to have native applications that allows you to go beyond what is just the platform or what is just the normal display frameworks are offering to you. That's the beauty of it. Now, having said all these non-functional mobility considerations and other things, we would like to go on to give you an hypothetical example of having these things and Dwarak will walk us through what it takes when you are considering the development and support costs.
Okay, so far we got some idea about what is web, what is native, what is hybrid. So we are going to provide some kind of information about how it can impact the cost. Generally, this has been debated in the past. A lot of articles, blogs are available in the web. But to provide some insight, we have categorized the mobile application cost into two parts: development, support, and maintenance. So some of the key points that we would like to discuss are: native apps are costlier when you are targeting more than one or two platforms. Example, iPhone, Android, Windows Phone, and BlackBerry. When there are more than two platforms, you have to have more dynamic content. Hybrid applications are seen to cost much lesser compared to native, with better usability and control. More number of code bases and costlier is the support for maintenance and expenses. When it comes to multiple platforms and devices, the testing cost would increase proportionally, but development cost may not change much if chosen web or hybrid approach. So the bottom line is hybrid is 25 to 40% lesser than the native mobile application development. So the mobile industry has rapidly growing ecosystem of cross-platform and cross-device frameworks. Source code analyzers, libraries, reusable components, and other tools designed to accelerate and simplify multiple platform development. We have listed some kind of framework and tools that will really have an importance with respect to developing the mobile application. New tools are constantly emerging with new features, functionality, different capabilities, and strengths and weaknesses. Developer preferences vary, particularly as new tools and capabilities become available. However, basic themes do not change. So we have, listed on the frameworks, which is more towards UI frameworks as well as application frameworks. With respect to guidelines, we have to follow coding guidelines, UI guidelines, and testing guidelines. On IDs and SDKs, the platform and the manufacturer is already providing certain IDs and SDKs for us to develop. So we have to follow with that. And other tools with respect to memory, instrumentation, and other third-party frameworks to develop the mobile application. Second thing I'm going to discuss about support costs for the multiple platforms. Here we have categorized, into bug fixes, OS upgradation, customer support, and release management. Overall, if you say hybrid application will cost less as compared to native, because you have a single code base and you will be able to manage the code base with respect to multiple platforms. With respect to native, you may have to have a different set of skills, different set of tools to support for native applications.
Wow, that's such an insightful information that you presented, Dwarak. Thank you. So now, having said what native, web, hybrid, and having compared few of the scenarios, let's talk about just simple points. When exactly you would like to choose the native apps or when not to choose the native apps. So basically, what we are saying is when you have need for high performance, richest UI and UX, or you want offline support, way to go is native applications. When you have functions heavy on operating systems and device features, or it does complex network communication, or more or like you have the applications that are based on just canvas-based layouts, you should choose the native applications. Like, again, one of the important things which you also noticed into the comparison slide in cost comparisons, when you have one or two platforms, that is when you can think of native. When you have like 5 or 6 platforms, native applications are going to be damn costly. So you be better worried about it. Now again, the bottom line is native applications are ideal when you need high security performance, such as healthcare apps or games or sports. Obviously, the counterpart is whenever you do not have these requirements, you think about native, think about hybrid and web applications.
I'm going to discuss about some kind of best practices on web application. So we keep hearing about web technologies catching up to native. When they say the web technologies are capable of rendering the graphical elements, GPS, camera, etc., these are certain things that are exposed by JavaScripting. Let us go through some points about this. First thing is, when you are looking for time to market, then you have to think about web application. Performance and UX, UI and UX is not a criteria, then you have to think about web. Automatic updates or dynamic update content definitely help in web application. If you are going with complex network communication and so on, then definitely web is not a right choice for you.
Well, so when do you do the hybrid app? The simple answer is that when you have the situation from native as well as the situation from web, way to do is hybrid app, but that's not so simple. Let me put it straightforward. Actually, when you have a fairly simple UI, which is powered with a complex backend, like server does a lot of stuff and gives you the things that are manipulated, which you only need to present or just preserve or do some minor things, tweaks here and there, hybrid apps are better. Or better when you have the optimized performance and cost and time requirements in terms of like you have 3 platforms or 4 platforms that you want to reach and time to market is very less. Of course, you can consider hybrid applications. When, say, for example, you have limited device integration required, like only the camera or the Bluetooth or things like that, and rest of the things is more content-driven, which is like control from some remote server, hybrid applications would do well. When it comes to user experience or feel like native applications kind of requirements, you can consider hybrid applications. But again, note that when you have only one platform targeted, hybrid applications are not best, because then you could have done with almost similar kind of effort and cost a better native application. Or when actually you don't need any access to APIs or device integration is required, probably you would have considered the web application as well. Or when your criteria of performance and UX, UI is far lesser compared to the one that we discussed earlier for native applications, probably this is something that needs to be considered. Again, native applications and hybrid applications, as far as the app discoverability and feel-good factor kind of download and install, uninstall kind of use cases are concerned, they are pretty much same. Okay. So having said all these things about native web and hybrid applications, which I know not so easy to cover everything into this 30-40 minute window, we would encourage you to post more questions and get in touch with us so that we will give more focused answers and make it available for everyone to know. With that, I would like to focus on just 30 seconds of what Endeavour does and what are our service offerings. Basically, Endeavour is a services-oriented mobility organization who focuses on mobile consulting and system integration. We have basically 4 different offerings to make enterprise mobile strategy, product management, mobile application development, and various technical services. So ranging from consulting with our customers or prospects about choosing the right roadmap and strategy for their mobility implementation to implementing that mobility roadmap for them, we cover end-to-end spectrum. As a value add, we are structured by providing various services. We have groups that are focused on mobility consulting, a group that is purely focused on UX. They do a specialized processes, doing the wireframes, prototyping, and through their specialized process such as product design, information architecture, and navigational element. We have a very good practice or a team that focuses on mobility integration with various MEP, MDM, or similar kind of platforms, deep integration expertise with SAP, Oracle, and similar kind of solutions. We are hardcore mobile development company having wide variety of experience ranging from older Palm M100 days to today's iPhone, iPad, Android, and sleekest tablet, smartphone, tablet kind of devices. And of course, we do mobility consulting to help you understand the nuances of this field as well as implement it.
Thank you, Tom, Avinash, and Dwarak for providing this valuable insight and helping our participants decide as which way to go in terms of mobile development. Now we open a line for the question and answer round.
Thank you, Sanjay. Uh, we got a lot of questions. So for with respect to native, hybrid as well as web. So we want to take it one by one, and then if time permits, we will try to answer more questions. Otherwise, we'll be sending it through email. So the first question is, what choice will bring me to market faster? Basically, this question is dependent upon your timeline. This may also have an impact on the type of apps you should build. For example, if you are having a programming skills and design consideration targeted platforms, there are certain factors that will affect the schedule. If you have a cross-platform or a hybrid apps application, which usually increase the time to market, then definitely the timeline can be reduced. However, if the budget or the resources are less concerned, two parallel teams of native application developers can hammer out and high-performing apps very quickly.
Okay. There is a next question saying that what is the market share today between native and web? So as of now, like there is no exact numbers available for native or web. But if you see like Apple App Store or Google's Play Store, we'll come to the, like most of the apps are native. So we can say that nearly like more than million apps are like native. And there is like Apple has like their own web store. So there nearly 5,000 apps are available. So the count is very less compared to native for web. But there is no exact number for hybrid. This is like basically like we cannot separate out whether it is native or hybrid from app store. So most of the apps are like native. So we can say like native count is nearly more than million.
Right. So on top of that, in the recent update that we could get today, that LinkedIn has converted the hybrid app to the native app. So that clearly showcases that people are moving towards native app because of better user experience, features that can be accessed, for example, notifications part and usability aspects of it. So the next question is, does a web app still require an app on the phone, or is it just accessed via browser? So generally, when you are developing a web application, there is no need as such to deploy the application on the web store, unless your a market or the focus area is more towards deploying the web application. For example, in Apple, there are 5,000 web apps already available. So it depends upon the business aspect. However, if you take as an enterprise or some kind of a web app, then we could say that web app no need to be deployed onto the app store. If you want to have a good look and feel, then you can create a shortcut onto the phone where it looks like a native app, but when you launch it, we can utilize the browser functionalities with full screen mode so that it looks like a native app.
There is a next question by one of the audience saying that why do you not have camera compatibility test for hybrid apps? So basically, like in hybrid app, we'll be launching the native camera application. So there is nothing like we have to do a lot of testing for camera compatibility. So we'll be like basically like basic testing is required, but you'll not be doing like full-fledged testing for camera compatibility.
Right. So as you suggested, I would like to add some more points on camera testing. So whenever you use a hybrid framework, what happens is when you try to launch or call a camera functionality, it launches the native application. So we do not have some kind of boundary that can be set for a specific area. For example, in a screen, you want a specific portion to be displayed as a camera and specific portion to be displayed as some kind of a control. In that case, only the testing will be more. Otherwise, just by launching a camera and capturing an image, it does not have much impact with respect to testing. Next question is, does a native apps always have its data stored locally, or can have a native app and external database? I mean, typically the mobile application framework supports the sandbox model. So any application does access the database, it will be within the application or within the framework only. It does not have any kind of external database unless you use some kind of existing core network and so on. but typically within your application you have your own sandbox model, and you will be maintaining the data within the application.
Okay. There is a next question like, what are the best cross-platform frameworks, IDA, and why? So basically, like there are like multiple cross-platform tools are available, like PhoneGap, Titanium, but like both has their own benefits and they have some disadvantages also. But if you want like native look and feel, so you have to go with the Titanium, which provides like native look and feel without any compromise. But if you want like more like effort should be less, then you can go for like PhoneGap, which has like more plugins, so you can use more of the most of the device functionalities. So these are like two best cross-platform tools are available, PhoneGap and Titanium.
And also, I think we also did some kind of an R&D with respect to Adobe, framework that has resulted well with respect to rendering of applications on the screen and multi-platform support. I mean, there might be a question that has been asked that how Adobe is supported in iPad or an Apple product. Basically, they have a framework and a wrapper created, so that libraries can convert the Flash or the scripting APIs to the native APIs, and then it renders it. So we could see that a lot of good results that we got when we use Adobe framework as well. So the next question is how to ensure that changes get broadcasted securely end to end as a push hybrid. So basically, when you talk about end-to-end security, you have to start your strategy much earlier. For example, when you see that your application has more sensitive information that is going to be passed between the client and the server, then you have to have a security from the requirement strategy to the design, as well as on the implementation part of view, and before we enter the deployment. So with respect to requirement and design strategy, so that is very important. So what kind of security approach that we have to take, whether that is suitable for the particular framework or does it suitable for the particular platform. So either it can be application data or a device data or a network data. So based on that we can take the approach. With respect to hybrid, the same approach what you are going to do it for native, the same thing will get reflected here also. However, there are browser related security aspects we have to take care. So that is very important, because in hybrid you will get both best and worst. So in case of security, yes, I would say that you have to take care of native security as well as browser related security. So the next question is so what is the best option for your mobile development strategy? First, we have to evaluate how and why we have to target the market, and based on that we have to achieve the goal. If the goal is achieved towards users or the interaction, then we have to go with native. So next, it has to be more creative and look beyond certain standard web or app implementation approach. So hybrid approach looks to be very promising, and then if you want to target for multiple platform, then it will be an ideal solution. So there is an interesting question that we got. What sort of app is required to stop the screenshot issue? So as we have explained in the presentation itself, so multiple combination of keys, for example home screen or the power button, can take the screenshot. So what we have identified is, if you are going for a native approach, whenever this home screen or that power button is pressed, we will identify the event. Based on the event, we can act upon it, either by sending the new screen or applying a new screen on top of the existing one, or hiding the data. So this can be achieved much faster in native. Even in hybrid we can achieve it. However, it depends upon the performance. Though the devices nowadays have a quad-core processor, 1 GB RAM and so on, but the framework as well as the UI framework will reduce the performance, and you'll be easily visible to see and take the screenshots. So to answer to this, there is no app which is available. We have to have a technique in place to identify that how we can hide the data in this situation.
Due to time constraints, you are not able to answer all the questions, but you can soon expect detailed answers to your questions in your mailbox. And if you have any more queries, please feel free to reach out to us at info@techendeavour.com for any more details. And as I stated in the beginning, the webinar will be made available on techendeavour.com/webinar shortly. Now, at the end, I would like to extend my gratitude to Tom, Avinash, and Dwarak for taking us through the entire presentation, and would like to have a special mention that this presentation is powered by KaiCube, a cloud-based solution for mobilizing your content to an interactive story. And last but not the least, I would also like to thank all the attendees, without whom the webinar would not have been such a big success. Appreciate your time and hope to see you at our forthcoming webinars. Have a good day. Thank you.